Holy cow! It's less than a week till opening day. I got so much to do. I've been busy around the house and doing everything else. I got some projects that I want to get done before season starts. This is one of them. It's going to be, I saw just a simple piece of plywood in a picture that someone had set up where they would just keep it in the back of the truck or whatever vehicle they happen to be using, slide it down so that it's just hanging off the tailgate, slide your deer up on it, and then you could lift up the bottom of that board to help get it in the back of the truck. My first deer last year, I had no idea what I was getting into. I've got a lifted truck with a ladder rack on it. I hauled this thing through the woods, wasn't prepared. It took everything I had to get it up in the truck, so I wanted to figure out something different this year. I'm also going to be probably using an Explorer instead of the pickup truck, so I'm going to modify this piece of wood so that I am using some casters that won't tear up the carpet sliding it in and out. And this will work really well. Also, I can keep some gear on it in my containers and just make it easier to move things in and out. One concern that I've had on my own was ticks. They're terrible on the deer here. I tanned a hide last year, my first one actually, and it was just full of ticks. The tanning solution killed them all. So I have already considered, and I've actually picked up a waterproof tarp that I can set on this platform, load the deer on, wrap it up to keep everything contained until I get at home to do all the processing. But here's the material list of what I've got. I've got just a scrap piece of plywood. It's 4 foot by probably 5 foot. It's actually an exterior plywood, but it doesn't make a difference, I don't believe. It just happened to be what I had. I've measured both my truck and the Explorer to figure out what length I need this to be. I've come up with, on mine, I've got shorter length in the truck because it's a short bed, and then I've got a toolbox in there, and then a shorter width in the Explorer, so I'm just going to go with the two shortest numbers, make it so it'll work in either vehicle. And it's going to be 54 by 44. I've got a drill with a bit that is just slightly larger than the bolt that's in these casters. I might actually be a hair big on mine. I might switch it down to a smaller bit just so I can kind of force this through the holes that I'm going to make. These casters were actually swivel casters, and they did spin with some bearings inside here, but I have another video where I actually took and put a little spot weld in the top of each one of these. I was concerned that once I had this mounted through the wood, that they'd be spinning all over different places, directing the travel of the platform, and I just wanted them to be stationary. Pencil, nuts, and washers for each of the. I've got 6 casters on this one. I feel like having 2 on the ends and then 2 in the middle is going to make the best weight distribution. Tape measure, and I've got a cordless saw. You can use whatever saw you happen to have, or some hardware stores, some of the big box stores and things like that will actually, if you have measurements, you can buy a piece of wood and they'll cut it for you. Might not be exact, but it'll work well enough. I'm going to mount these onto the platform, and then I'm considering the idea of adding some edges around the sides, make it a little more rigid and help contain any of my gear, or if I have a deer on here, it'll help contain that also. But there we go, get started on this. Then I'm going to mark this to the 54 by 44. I might take a little bit off of that just in case I decide to add sides to it at some point. I don't know if you can tell, but I've cut probably more drywall in my life than I should have, so that's the way I'm doing my measuring. You could use a straight edge, you could use a chalk line, whatever's easiest for you. next step will be drill on the holes for the casters. Because it's a relatively wide board, I'm gonna actually have 3 casters along the longer edge, and there's only going to be 2 in this direction, so I'm actually going to pull it in probably 4 or 5 inches, just to shorten this gap in the center. Let's go with, let's say 5 inches. There it is. I've got probably 10 minutes in building this, if you don't count that I needed to get the welder out in order to do these casters. The casters I use are just ones that I had sitting around. You can use ones that are already locked in position, or don't use casters at all, especially if you're just putting it in the back of your pickup truck. This board will slide in and out just fine. I just happen to be using more of our family vehicle, potentially, just for comfort. My truck's kind of beat up, but while I was doing this, I have decided that I'm going to put sides on it. I might actually even put a little bit taller side on what I would consider the bottom end, so that I can cut some grooves in it to pick it up and slide it in. So this is what I'm going to use for the sides. Just some scrap stuff I had laying around. I got some 2x. They're actually 2x4. One of them's a little bit narrower. It won't make a difference. I'm going to cut these into some blocks that I'll screw on from the bottom, and then I'll put 3 down each side, possibly 1 in the middle, and that will just give me something, an edge that I can screw this piece onto, and you'll see that it'll create a box around here. I'm also going to use, this is just a leftover from our privacy fence we put up. It's a little bit taller, and my idea is that I will probably drill a couple holes and then cut out a groove that I can stick my fingers in for this bottom end. And then that'll give me something to pick up the weight with in order to help lift and push this into a vehicle. Deer could be a couple 100 pounds, honestly, so any little extra that I can come up with will be super helpful. Okay, now that I have all those cut, I'll just use some 1 coarse screws. They'll grab onto the wood really well. The 2x is 1.5 inches wide. This is probably 5/8 of an inch wide, so they won't stick through the other side either. If I just make it flush with this edge and this edge, it'll make a really nice nailing surface for the 1x that I'm going to be attaching. You could actually run an entire 2x along here, of course. I just had some scratch laying around, so this will work just fine. It'll give me plenty of contact points. It'll also make it more rigid, being able to handle more weight without bending as much. Now we'll just cut and attach the sides and do some modification on this inboard. Both of these sides should be the same, or approximately the same. think I will just make it flush with the bottom of the 2x there. And that'll still leave an 1.5 inch or so lip around this side here. The bottom, this other end, I will do the same. Since this board's taller, of course, it'll stick up a little more, but I think that'll work just fine. And you could probably nail these if that's what you have, if you don't have access to a drill or an impact. If you nail it, I would definitely recommend gluing, because nails aren't going to hold as well as screws will. "44 inches. I'm going to hold this up here and kind of get an idea of where I want to put my handles at. There's no rule on this, so I'm just going to do what's comfortable. I'm going to come in 10 and 15 on either end. I'm also going to cut off the corner there to make it look a little nicer. Looks like I've got just a little over 3 inches, 3 1/4, so I'm going to go half of that up will be the center of where I'm drilling. 5/8. I'm going to use a hole saw. This one is 1 3/8. You could use 1.5 inch. I mean, just whatever you happen to have. I think you can even get other type bits that would work the same way. Or you could probably just cut a couple grooves in this and jigsaw around this if you don't happen to have these type bits. Okay, got the holes cut here. Now I'm just going to cut straight across here and round off the corners, and that'll create the handles that it can pick this up with. There it is. Probably run a little sandpaper along here, make that a little bit smoother. Otherwise, pretty good, ready for testing. So the plan was to have my beautiful wife out here helping me get this done. Well, she decided she wasn't interested, so with a little extra convincing, I got her out here anyway. It's all assembled, ready to go. I'm going to get it lifted up in here and show you how it works.
Coffee you made. This was not what you told me we were doing. Mommy! Mom! Mom! I didn't do good. You're not going to show this to the kids, are you? No wives were harmed in the making of this video. Hey, if you're digging the channel and you want to see more, you know what to do. But she's laughing at me, honey. That's not
You're
nice.
adorable.
I'm so cute.